Boom. And we are now live. What is up, everybody? Chris here from Judo Launch, and I've got Gary with me from 80/20 Sourcing. Before we jump into anything, introductions and all that, just want to make sure that the audio and video is coming through clearly. So if any of you guys can just leave a comment, just a thumbs up, or yep, we hear you, or a smiley face or a winky face or whatever tickles your fancy, go ahead and do that so we know that we're coming through.
And I'm curious where everybody's calling in from. Maybe if you want to give a shout out from where you are.
Good call, because right now it's pretty late where Gary and I are in Shanghai. It's 10 p.m., getting close to our bedtimes. So yeah, I'd be curious to know that too, where everybody's calling in from. We got quite a few people jumping in here now, so I'm stoked to get started. Nice. All right. Looks like the audio's coming through clear, video's coming through clear. We got Andre Vic 13 from Italy showing up, so we're already an international crew.
Ciao.
Yeah, and we've got Ziggy from China. All right.
Awesome.
Nice. So Sydney, Australia, repping it. That's great. Cool. So let's get started here. So I will introduce myself. I'm Chris Rawlings. I am CEO and founder of Judo Launch, which is a company that helps Amazon sellers launch their products, specifically on international Amazon markets like Europe, Japan, the US. And then we also help to automate the account processes of those jurisdictions as well. And I myself am an Amazon seller and have been for 3 years, selling on many different international markets, my own health brand. So I'm hitting this from multiple angles. And we are lucky enough to have Gary here from 80/20 Sourcing. Gary, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be here, and I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, so I'm Gary. I'm boots on the ground here in Shanghai, China. I've been here for the last 10 years. I'm the founder of 80/20 Sourcing, and I help a lot of Amazon and e-commerce sellers find trustworthy suppliers from China. And then basically, rather than feeding a man a fish, my philosophy is I would rather teach them how to fish, teach them how to source from China. So I help a lot of e-commerce sellers that way. Prior to this, in my corporate job before that, I was working sourcing here in Shanghai. I managed multi-million-dollar sourcing campaigns, like various different industries, solar energy, auto parts, exercise equipment. So I've seen hundreds of Chinese factories. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly sides. So my goal is to help people avoid that, save time and money. And today, I was super excited when Chris reached out to me because we're going to talk about some of the Chinese sellers that are selling on Amazon, some of the launch strategies you've never heard of, that we're seeing on the ground here in China. I was actually invited to an Amazon training seminar put on by Amazon, especially for Chinese sellers. So, maybe we can get into that. I'll share about, what I learned. And there's a lot of energy going on, a lot of excitement about Amazon, here in China.
Oh yeah, dude, things move so fast here. It's so crazy. Like when I moved here to Shanghai a couple months ago for this accelerator program that Judo joined, it was mind blowing to me. I was like, whoa, New York City is like way behind. No one uses cash. It's like all WeChat Pay and Alipay. And I'm like, holy shit, how did I not even know that like we'd fallen behind like this?
Yeah.
The adoption of technology and like the speed of progress here is just insanity. Sometimes I worry if there's like almost like a lack of the prioritization on like being a human being sometimes because there's so much productivity happening like so
Yeah.
fast. It's like New York, but like a level up,
Yeah.
level like more intense than that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Sure.
I think there are things to learn from it and things to learn not to do from it, on both sides. So I'm stoked to jump into both of those sides here now, and we can get into the nitty gritty. The dark stuff, the path you don't want to go down, and then the good stuff, the things that we can draw from and learn from.
Definitely. Yeah. Sounds
Yeah,
good.
man. Sweet, dude. Yeah. So you mentioned that you've been invited to some like seminars and workshops that Amazon themselves are putting on to provide extra support specifically to Chinese sellers and help them be successful and sell. Why do you think that Amazon is giving this type of support to Chinese sellers that, at least from my perspective, it seems that European and Americans, and other international sellers seem to not be getting?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I like to think of it what Jeff Bezos said, your margin is my opportunity. Your margin is my opportunity. So if we think
That's
about that,
scary, man.
yeah, if we think about that for a second, I mean, a lot of Amazon sellers in the States or in like EU, they're making their margin, but if Bezos goes direct to China, and then if Amazon helps a lot of these sellers like and shows them how to do the whole Amazon selling thing, I mean, a lot of that margin is going to go back to Amazon, right? I mean, like lower prices, and I think that's something that Amazon wouldn't be disappointed to see, right? So I think on a high level, I mean, I'm just speculating, but from what Bezos said and from what I'm seeing, obviously, if you're a Chinese seller, if you're in China, you're in the same culture, you have the same language, you're in the same area, you can just go to the factory. They could be your cousin, they could be your uncle, or your high school buddy or whatnot. I've met Amazon sellers that literally they have like really tight connections with factories, Chinese Amazon sellers, so they definitely have the advantage. But yeah, I was invited to that Amazon training event in Yiwu a few weeks ago. Did you want to do you want me to share a little bit more about that, or what do you think?
Actually, yeah, I'm curious. What Amazon is saying. At these. And so when you went, were you one of the only like Westerners there, or was it a mix of expats and locals, or what?
No. My understanding is that Amazon, they target Amazon sellers registered in China, and then everything is in Chinese. So I live in China. Um, so I received an email in Chinese from some Amazon representative, like informing me that there was going to be an event in Yiwu. And then there were actually two sessions. There was a morning session, and then there was an afternoon session. And then they actually divided the level or the experience of the sellers. So the morning session was for sellers with at least 1 year selling experience on Amazon, so beyond the basics. And then the afternoon session was for beginners, right? So I was invited to the morning session. Everything is in Chinese. So if you don't speak Chinese, it isn't going to do you much good. And then there were about 3 or 4 Amazon representatives there, and they just gave different talks about PPC, like how to set up your campaigns. They talked a little bit about AMS, like headline search. But what I found really interesting is that they offered some like market forecast information and like trends. So for example, for EU, they had like this one slide that I remember. There was like this XY axis, and then it was kind of like, like which products are cash cows, which products are stars, which products are dogs, right? And then like they literally like ranked it out because Amazon, they got all this information in all their computers, they have machine learning, AI, all that good stuff, right? So it's from the horse's mouth. It's not like, I mean, Jungle Scout is an awesome tool. but it's from the horse's mouth, right? So they literally were kind of like guiding these sellers, like what products are trending, which ones like are saturated, and that. So that was kind of interesting. And also, they were really hyping up Amazon Japan. I think Amazon wants to make a big splash in Japan.
Yeah, I keep hearing that over and over and over.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at it geographically, if you look at the map, I mean, Japan's right beside China. You know, like if I were to fly to Japan, like from Shanghai, it's like a shorter flight than I think to Hong Kong. You know, it's like literally it's so close. Obviously, the culture, like you know, certain things are very different, like what the market likes. But it just seems like it's so close. And then if you send like an ocean shipment, I think it takes like a week. You know, it's super fast compared to the US. You know, a couple of weeks, or Europe, like 45 days. You know, so if you, yeah. So they were really pushing Japan. And one other interesting thing, and then I think this is like a best practice that I see among Chinese sellers, is that for the Yiwu training session, they were really targeting fashion, like clothes, like shoes, jewelry, and stuff like that. And the reason is because Yiwu traditionally, I mean, they're really strong in these type of like jewelry and like, you know, Halloween costumes, like not really, like you won't see any electronics there. It's not like Shenzhen. You know, if you look at China on the map, so there's like different regional clusters. So Amazon, they're obviously not stupid. They're not going to give a talk about electronics in Yiwu when like nobody there can source electronics, right? So they talk about like fashion. They were talking about like Japanese, you know, what women are wearing in the fall, like menswear was like a huge opportunity as well. So I think that's one thing that we can learn from the Chinese sellers, is that they really play to their strengths, right? Like in that room, there were probably like 150 people. You know, I was just like overhearing some conversations, like at least, I mean, like almost everybody that I spoke with, I asked them what are they selling, and then they said jewelry, and then, you know, so I think that's a best practice, like really, you know, play to your strengths and sourcing locally.
I totally agree with that. I think cool. By the way, Gary, do you have headphones? Because I'm getting an echo. I don't know if our viewers are, but you can either mute yourself or lower the volume or use headphones. Probably.
Sorry, let me just double check. I do have a microphone. The microphone should be okay. Is this better?
Check. Yes, that is better. No echo. The echo's gone. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I think that is so true. Playing to, I was just on a podcast last week while at Rise in Hong Kong, and they ended up taking one sentence that I said and making it the subject of the podcast, which I think is very relevant to mention here. And that was shameless with the cards I'm dealt. I was telling them about how when I was starting in the solar industry, I kind of hacked my way into a business role, even though I was from a technical background. I had a degree in physics. I was all science and math oriented. And I was doing electrical design for solar systems, but I wanted to get into business because I knew that would help me control my own destiny. So the way I did it was there was a division being spun out of the company I was working for, and nobody wanted to handle it. So I told everybody that I was going to handle it. And the reason they said yes is because my dad was owner of the parent company. And although he never would have been cool with me doing it, everybody else was afraid to say no because I was. And I know a lot of people would have been like, oh, don't play that card, or, you know, like make it on your own or whatever. But my attitude was like, whatever, like I'm going to use this. Like if I'd gone to my dad and been like, yo, I want to run this college kid, you don't have any business experience, you can't do that. But instead, I basically just started doing it, and I think nobody asked any questions. And so I was like, I told, Michael, who was Michael Wade's podcast, I'm shameless with the cards I'm dealt. Whatever I have, I'll use that. Use those strengths. Don't try to patch up your weaknesses all the time. I think that's a key lesson, and I think to take out of from the Chinese sellers. And like you said, many people probably don't know this, Gary. I didn't know this until I started coming here, but what you said is like true to it in extreme here in China, and everything is localized because it's essentially planned economy, unlike the US where things just organically grow.
Right. Yeah, it is.
This is centrally planned here. If the government cardboards, I'm in a tax factory then because you said so, and I know that that's my only option now. Yeah, so it's extremely focused.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. So, what I wrote down here from the conversation that we had before that we started to delve into a little bit, and I just want to ask because I think in my experience, some stereotypes are unfair and other stereotypes end up having some like element of truth to them. And I know there's a lot of talk about black hat strategies happening in China. So I wanted to ask you what your take is. What do you think? Like, how much of the tactics that Chinese-based Amazon sellers use are black hat versus white hat?
Yeah, I think that this is a hot topic right now, and
it is. It's very hot. I always see new articles coming out about it.
Yeah, black hat versus white hat. I think before we look at like how prevalent it is, Chris, we should look at kind of the cultural undertone behind that, because I always say this, like, it's like what is acceptable or what is ethical in one place, could be not acceptable or could be unethical in another place. So let's say in the US, like, for example, copying someone else's like essay, for example, in school, everybody knows that's plagiarism, right? I mean, you're going to get failed if you do something like that. But in China, in the education system here, people are actually, like, students are trained this way. This is how you learn. Like, you copy like the poems, right? And you copy, and people don't necessarily have that connotation, So I think that this is like one of the genesis of a lot of the copycats, like the bootleg, like Louis Vuitton handbags and DVDs, this and that and the other thing, right? Because culturally, what is not acceptable in one country may be acceptable in another country, right? I'm not saying like who's right or who's wrong, but I think that let's just acknowledge that, and then with black hat in China, a lot of these sellers, they could be they could be new sellers, like they want to boost their reviews. They may not be aware of TOS, right? They may not be aware that you're not supposed to incentivize reviews. You're not supposed to buy reviews, but they go to like one of the hundreds of Amazon training sessions in Shenzhen. They find like a trainer, and then they say, okay, you want to get reviews? This is how you do it. And then whether it's right or wrong, some people may not care, right? So I think the important thing is the undertone. And then I always think about one of the greatest Chinese leaders, Deng Xiaoping. He was the president in the 80s. Like, he literally transformed Shenzhen during reform and opening. Like, Shenzhen, back then it was a swamp. It was a fishing village, early 80s.
Yeah, not even 20, a little over 20 years ago, right?
Yeah. And now, it's like the Silicon Valley of China. All of the makers are going there, and they're getting like ton of VC money, like worldwide. It's insane. But like Deng Xiaoping said, one very famous line, it's it doesn't matter if it's a black cat or a white cat, as long as it can catch mice, right? If you think about it, it doesn't matter if it's a black cat or a white cat, as long as you can catch mice, right?
Whoa, man. Yeah. That says a lot.
Yeah. That says a lot, right? So just wanted to give everybody that cultural background, because I feel like to understand, other people, you have to put yourself in their shoes first, right? That's what I always try to do when I try to understand. Okay, so going back into Black Hat, we talked a little bit about review manipulation. We see that obviously multiple Amazon accounts. I've heard rumors. Some boss would hire a bunch of employees and force each employee to sign up for an individual Amazon account, and then he would take ownership of those accounts. And you're probably asking, hey, can't Amazon track the IP? Well, he thought of that. So he would literally give each employee his own laptop, give him like a phone, like Tether, like SIM card or whatnot. So everybody is on a different IP, different laptop. So there's no like common thread that, one person logs into multiple accounts. That's
dude. That is one I've never heard. That is wild.
Yeah. I mean, stuff like that, it happens. And then, yeah, I mean, just leveraging the manpower in China. I mean, China has 1.3 billion people. It's a lot easier to hire people a lot cheaply than in the States. So that's another thing.
I've heard the one that I always hear about.
Yeah, what have you heard?
Yeah. I mean, I was on a panel in Hong Kong during Rise. Michael Michelini invited me to be on a panel. It was with Chris Davey, a blockchain e-commerce company, and a Chinese-based seller who'd been selling on Amazon for a number of years. And I think he's based in Shenzhen. And it was really interesting hearing everybody's different perspectives. I got such cool strategies out of Chris Davey that I want to share at a different time that's not in line with this this talk. But yeah, on to your point on different values, and different mindset around this. When we're talking about black hat versus white hat, I think the line is kind of blurred here for sure. And the seller based in China who was we touched on the subject, and he said, "Oh yeah, no, like every seller I know is in a bunch of WeChat groups, and the WeChat groups are private, and you go in there and you're vetted. You have to be invited, and they're filled with people who are actually like in the US who will buy a product at full price in exchange for being paid that amount plus some amount on top." And he was talking about like how the evolution of this process. So obviously this is against Amazon's terms of service. You can't incentivize a review by paying someone for it. You can't incentivize it actually in any way. You can't even incentivize it through a discount these days or any other way. So this is like the most blatant, type of violation, but it's totally prevalent according, to the seller that I was paneling with last week. And what he said, it was really interesting how he talked about the evolution of this process, because apparently it used to be quite easy, although it's always been against terms of service. It was very easy, 2-3 years ago. And then Amazon has been getting more and more diligent and more sophisticated about how to track down these reviews and how to increase compliance and enforce their terms. And he was talking about how now they're analyzing not just the reviewers themselves and what products they review and how often they review, which they do. So they can only review so many times before they say, hey, you know what, you're sketchy. Whether these reviews are real or not, we don't even care. You can't leave reviews anymore. Like they will do that to buyer accounts.
Yeah.
And then to seller accounts, what the seller was telling me was that now it's not even just about who reviewed the product or what the reviews content were, but straight up the raw velocity of reviews. So they have data on for each product in each category when a new product goes live, how quickly a product can get reviews. And if you exceed that invisible threshold, they block you from getting reviews. And that was something that I did not know, or I had not heard before, at least.
Mm-hmm.
And thought that was really interesting. I do think, Chris Davey pointed out that, he thinks all of these developments by Amazon that are getting more sophisticated and blocking these black hat strategies are really, really good for, smart sellers who focus on product and delivering value. And, that's, I think, unquestionably true, that the less there is the ability to do, more black hat strategies, the greater chance there is for folks who are focused on delivering straight up good product and good customer experience to win based on merit. So yeah, I do think that although Amazon can be scary, and all sellers know that we all have love-hate relationships with Amazon for a multitude of reasons,
Right.
I do think that enforcement is good for the community at large.
Yeah, I think, Chris, you raised a really interesting point. I mean, like, on one hand, catching out all of the black hat and like the people playing dirty, but on the other hand, kind of helping the ones that are playing by the rules, that are offering, good quality product, that are making Amazon's customers happy. And these people, I feel like Amazon, they want these people to rise to the top, regardless if they're in China or US or whatnot. And maybe we can look at Anker, the famous Chinese, power bank, electronics,
yes,
as a case study.
Story.
Yeah, I was doing a little, noodling around and Googling about Stephen Yang. He's the CEO of Anker. He was born and raised in China, in Changsha, China, but I don't think he's the typical Chinese Amazon seller. The reason is because, number one, his education. Did you know that he went to Peking University, which is, like the Harvard of China? It's even harder to get into than Harvard. He went to literally, the top number one school in China. And then afterwards, like, he studied in the US. He went to University of Texas, Austin. So, he did get, I think it was a graduate degree, I'm not sure, but he did get education in the US. And afterwards, he worked at Google. He was a programmer at Google, in Silicon Valley in Mountain View for a number of years. He worked there about 5 years. So obviously, if he can, if he went to Peking University, the Harvard of China, if he got into Google, I mean, that's pretty good for anybody, not just like, someone from China, right? But the really interesting part is, while he was working at Google, I don't know if you heard about this, but do you know what his wife was doing while he was working at Google?
No, I haven't heard this. I only heard the high level version of this story.
Yeah. So his wife was selling on Amazon. His wife, like, during this time, Steven, the CEO of Anker, was working at Google. His wife was selling on Amazon. And then his wife asked him, like, hey, Steven, help me out here. And then Steven took his programming skills and then he built like an automation software to help his wife start listing products on Amazon and, like, do all that follow-up stuff, like maybe kind of like what Judo Launch does today, or I don't know. But anyways, that's, that was the genesis of how, Anker got started. Like, it was through his wife. And then, this is another thing that I think we can learn from successful Chinese sellers is working with family, because in China, family could be the number one thing, that people just the family bond is so strong, like here in China. So, he worked with his wife, but that's not the end of the story. He worked about 5 years at Google, and then he was asking himself, what's next? And then he saw his wife's success on Amazon, and then he wanted to do something too. So at that time, he talked to his mom. His mom was, she used to work in government, but then later she started a pharmaceuticals company in China. So, he asked his mom for advice, and then his mom actually helped, was supportive of him. And I find that this is like very important for successful entrepreneurs, whether you have that support network, whether it's from your wife, your family, your parents. And I think like, like you too, Chris, like, your father, I mean, I assume that, he was supportive of you, but going back to the story, his mother also chipped in some money along with, Steven's Google savings to source that first product, and then allowed him to move to Shenzhen.
No way.
To start Anker.
So his mom funded him?
His mom partially funded him.
Wow.
His mom partially funded him. So he was able to leverage, family, his mother helping fund his business, and as well as, helping his wife. That's how he first got exposed to Amazon. And then, he moved to Shenzhen, very close to the source again, kind of like what we learned earlier, right? Like the Yiwu sellers, they're close to jewelry. So obviously they do what their strength, follow your strengths, right? I think that was Jim Collins, right? Like from good to great, like, play your strengths. So that's what he did, and he took that, he positioned himself where he would maximize his chances for success in Shenzhen, because all of the power bank manufacturers, all of the cell phone, accessory manufacturers, they're all there in Shenzhen. So obviously you're close to the factory, short supply chain. You can pick up the phone and call them. You can even visit multiple factories, in a day. You can do quality control. You can see them to make sure they're not, pulling the wool over your eyes, right? So I think that, looking at Anker, I think there's a lot that, we can learn from, right? I mean, working with family, learning that experience first, working with his wife, getting funding from his mom, and, with that family support, and then also, going to the source, right? Sourcing locally. I think that, there's a lot of takeaways that we can learn from.
Yeah, so, and it's true. And I think that was actually, in my view, like a healthy mix between like opportunistic selling and like branding. And I think this is kind of a subject we should touch on here, because I do think that this is kind of almost like another one of those cultural differences, in that, in my experience and, through what I've heard through the grapevine, and, what I see with sellers that Judo Launch deals with, is that working with Chinese sellers, it's more likely to work with a company who sells based on basically what Amazon was presenting directly to, the sellers at that conference in Yiwu, is, what's trending, what's hot, what's selling a lot right now, what's increasing sales over time. It's like what at Judo Launch we call those opportunistic sellers, versus, a seller who doesn't really care about what's hot, but focuses on the character and identity of their brand, which I think is less prevalent from, traders and sellers in China, and more prevalent in for the more Western sellers. And it sounds like kind of, it was the beauty and magic. What happened with Anker was that there was kind of a fusion of both of those things. There seemed to be like the focus on building a brand. It was all the electronics products, the power banks, the cords, all of that stuff. So they stayed true to the brand, at least at first. I don't know how the company has expanded, these days, but there was also, from what I have heard, and I've spoken with, consultants who come over and deal with these big brands here, that there's also, a focus on obsessive data, like data obsessed, like knowing like exactly like what position they need to be to sell X amount at X dollars per unit to undercut the competitor and beat the competitor, and, make X amount of profit. And that data obsession, I think, is something that I try to imbibe in my own business, because I'm very bad at just getting lost in spreadsheets and shit. That's not my thing. I mean, I love data, but like drawing it out, and like studying it for hours is just mind numbing to me. Like I like the insights once it comes out. And that's why I use tools like SaaS tools to just feed me the insights. But yeah, sometimes a little bit more of that process oriented thinking, I feel, can be useful, for
Yeah,
myself and, for other businesses too.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I think that you touched upon a couple interesting points there, Chris. One is the opportunistic selling. I feel like Chinese sellers are more flexible. There's more like flexibility in the mindset as to what products I can sell. They don't necessarily say, okay, I'm, like let's take Xiaomi, for example. Xiaomi is one of the top brands in China. They sell cell phones, they sell electronics, but at the same time, they sell backpacks. They sell air
Exactly.
purifiers.
Yeah.
They sell like video, like baby monitors. I don't think an Apple would, sell baby monitors, right? But for
Right. Although
Xiaomi,
I do hear that they're about to sell cars.
I
By the
wouldn't be
way.
surprised.
So yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised, man. Uh,
Yeah.
but just I think in terms of that opportunistic selling, not necessarily limiting yourself. I mean, I think it's healthy, from the entrepreneurial mindset, right? You don't want to limit yourself because, for example, with my private label brands, I'm sure I've had successes, but I've made mistakes as well, right? But if I didn't, go into separate categories, like let's say I started in the health category first, right? It sold really well in 2016. I was in the smartphone category, that sold well before, but afterwards, competition got really fierce, right?
I
It
know
turned
how
to
it
a red
is, dude.
ocean. Like new
Yep.
competitors were
Red
coming in
Ocean.
overnight, price war, race to the bottom. But at the same time, I saw this other opportunity in kitchen. If I were to just limit myself like tunnel vision, like a typical brand owner, I may not have, got the kitchen opportunity where, I'm a top seller. I'm ranked number 3 on the first page on Amazon for my primary keyword, right? So, I think that,
Awesome.
yeah, in terms of opportunity, that's something that we can learn from as well. Not limiting ourselves. I think that was a really great point, Chris.
So what is your personal philosophy then, Gary? Do you focus on character and brand identity, or do you really mostly focus on, what is a good opportunity from a quantitative standpoint?
Um, I think if you asked me this question like 2 years ago, I would have been just pure opportunity. I would have been just, using tools, finding, because at that time, I was at the beginning of my Amazon private label journey, and I really didn't have any like fixed assets. If you ask me right now, let's say I'm pretty strong in my kitchen niche, and then I want to build a moat around it, right? So I'm, building out an email list. I'm, building out a brand. I'm diving
Right.
deeper into more products that my customers want to solve their pain points, right? I'm even looking at like a subscription product to go along with my other products. So this way I have that lifetime value of my customer.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. So
Nice.
yeah. So now, I'm trying to build a moat around this. The reason I have this philosophy is because going back to those other products that suddenly became so saturated, let's say with my health product, it didn't have like a really high review the first generation. It was maybe like, less than 4 stars, right? And then like new competitors came in. So I released a second generation model that fixed some of the problems. But because I had a pure Amazon model, there was no way I could reach out to my past customers, right? If I wanted to let them know, hey, Chris,
Exactly.
like you bought our first generation. Did you know we have a new one coming out, and, for special customers like you, 40% off. I'm sure I could have climbed up the listings a lot better if I had something like that, but I didn't. So that's why like my philosophy now is creating a moat around my products so that, I'm collecting customer emails. I'm, this way, when I release new products, I can retarget, I can remarket, and, there's a lot more that you can do that way.
Yeah. And plus, when it comes time to sell the business, it makes it so much more valuable as well. We did a webinar with Troy from Seller.tools, who sold his brand for a 7-figure, well into 7 figures amount. And, we went through everything that added value to the brand. And it was much more than just a raw, sales or profit. It was everything from your trademarks to, like, do you have an email list, to, the engagement of that list, to your content assets, all of these things that, like you said, build that moat. It makes that business more valuable. And I'm sure that a lot of folks who are viewing this right now, either live or after the fact, are planning on at some point selling their businesses. So it's something to keep in mind for the long term.
Yeah, definitely. Well. And then it increases the value of your business exponentially. Like if you only had an Amazon business versus if you had a business that had Amazon, if you had your own site, if you had social media, if you had followers on Facebook, and then if you had like a subscription model that's recurring revenue, that's like super attractive to a buyer that wants to come in. Like let's say he's a retired banker, like he doesn't want to do that anymore, he wants like a lifestyle business. That would look a lot more attractive to people, willing to pay more for that.
Yeah, exactly. And it also depends on the acquirer as well. So going back to the Troy webinar, he was talking about how he was talking to private equity folks. And private equity guys are always trying to get, the best deal. A lot of times they're only going after distressed assets and, trying to get the lowest possible multiple. But then what he ended up doing is finding an acquisition partner who was a bigger company that could plug his brand into their company and was complementary to the products they were offering. And they knew that they could immediately use that company to expand their sales and take greater, exploit their assets in a better way. And so he got a much better multiple from that, and the company provided more value to them than it would have, some random PE roll up where they actually didn't have complementary products at all. So yeah, it definitely depends.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to ask a high level question, since we're now in the final quarter, the final 25% of our webinar here. And that is, being that you've had boots in the ground, you've seen kind of both sides of the spectrum, and you're kind of in a very unique place, I think, Gary, and you have a very unique perspective, which is why it's so exciting to, have you on here and have this chat with you. In the long term, when Amazon starts to reach some sort of equilibrium, what role do you think Chinese sellers will play, and what role do you think that Western sellers will play in the marketplace?
So what role Chinese sellers will play and what role Western sellers will play in the marketplace? I think that
long term,
right now, I think I read somewhere that about 36% of all Amazon sellers worldwide are based in China. 36%. I think that now there's a significant number of registered Chinese sellers. I know some of them have never made a sale yet. So the actual number I'm not aware of.
Last number I heard, by the way, about .com market specifically, was over 50%.
Over
for .com, not globally, but just for .com for the US market.
Yeah, it could be, but I think
either way, yeah.
But I think that one of the other habits of successful sellers that I see is not over worrying about things outside of your control. It goes to back to the 7 habits, right? Stephen Covey. Like some things like all right, there's a lot of Amazon, there's a lot of Chinese sellers jumping into Amazon. Can you control that? No, right? But what can you do to maximize your chance of success, right? I think that's more important. Going back to your question, long term, I feel like many of the new sellers, they don't know what they're doing, but they're curious to try it out. Totally in China, a lot of the people in the room, I don't think they know what they were doing, but they're very curious to try it out. Like that, there was one guy, one Chinese seller, he just chatted me up after the event, and he said that he's doing like 10 sales a day on Amazon, but he's doing 1,000 sales a day on Taobao in China. Taobao, which is basically the eBay or Amazon of China. It's the #1 shopping site. So to me, for Chinese sellers, I mean, the local e-commerce market, like a Taobao, for example, that's their low-hanging fruit, right? If you have a factory, if you're manufacturing something, and I mean, doesn't it make more sense for you to just like sell it in China, because you know the language, you know the culture, you know the whole system, and it'd be a lot more difficult for someone like you and me, Chris, coming from abroad to try to penetrate that market, right? So I feel like Amazon is kind of like really sexy right now. Everybody's like talking about it, but are people going to be successful long run? I'm not sure. I think there's going to be a shakeout, and I think that only the top players will remain, like the ones that are doing things the right way, like Anker. You see, like they're one of the top 10 sellers in Amazon.com. Because the reason is because not just because of their price, but because they have quality product. Their iPhone cables are a lot better than like the really cheap ones, right? And then at the same time, they have like on social media, they have more followers than like old school brands like Whirlpool, for example. I mean, this is from Anker, so like they know what they're doing. And I think they're the ones that are going to come out on top. A lot of the Me Too sellers, a lot of the ones doing black hat, I mean, Amazon's not stupid, right? I mean, they have all that, like what you said, if this new listing is racking up 500 reviews in one day, I mean, Amazon's going to be like, okay, we're on that. We're going to flag that.
More and more.
Yeah. You know what I mean? They got all that big data, machine learning, all that good stuff at their disposal. So I don't think long-term, Amazon's going to allow that. The reason is because it's going to ruin their marketplace and the customer experience. That's #1 for Bezos. I mean, customers are #1. So I don't think that, those guys are going to come out on top. But at the same time, Amazon is helping Chinese sellers, like what we talked about in the beginning. They're literally holding their hands. There were easily 100 sellers in that room, and then events like this are ongoing. So Yiwu was last month. This month, I know there's one in Hangzhou. I know there's one in Guangzhou as well. So I mean, Amazon's really helping the Chinese sellers. But I think at the same time, people in the US, people in EU and Australia, they still have the advantage in knowing about the marketplace and what consumers want, right?
Yes.
So definitely they know what the consumers' pain points are and how to solve them, right? I think that's one big advantage that Western sellers have. For Chinese sellers, just like in terms of like product quality or expectations, sometimes, the factory will just like make a decision for you without telling you, because, they assume that that's okay. I mean, it's okay in China, right? Like maybe, for your t-shirt, Chris, the X, if it's like, a little bit, one shade of, I don't know, like red that's a little lighter. I mean, that's okay. I don't think Chris is mind, right? But like,
I've run into this many times with my supplier, dude. That's exactly where it's like that difference comes in. You're like, no, the logo has to be straight, not at a diagonal. And they're like, oh yeah, but there's a small margin. It's like, no, dude, no, it has to be straight, like fully straight. Like we were getting units where like the logo would be like this or like this. And they'd be like, oh yeah, as long as it's not sideways. Like, no, the margin of error that I'll accept is much different, obviously, than yours.
Right. Yeah. So what you just experienced, Chris, that's exactly the challenge that a lot of Chinese sellers have, because they don't know the market expectation. They don't know what the consumer wants. They feel like the standard in their home country is going to be the same, but it's not. That's why a lot of them are going to get, all those negative reviews dinged on them, and then that's not going to be a sustainable business long term. So Western sellers still have this advantage. Maybe the Chinese sellers can compete on price, but creating like an Apple quality, like a high-end product, an aspirational product, I have not seen that happen yet from a Chinese brand. I'm not saying that's never going to happen, but as of today, I have not seen that. So, I think long-term Western sellers will still have that advantage. But I think at the same time, the days of simply slapping like a logo on a product, not making any improvements, and just like throwing it up on Amazon and expect it to sell forever, I think that's coming to an end, or it's already past. The
Totally.
Past. You got to add
100%
value.
agree.
Yeah, you got to add value. You got to solve your customers' pain points, right? So that's what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, I'm 100% with that, and that reminds me of something that that actually Chris Davey shared with me during this panel last week, and it was this strategy was pretty mind blowing to me, and it's simple, but it gives you the advantage of being able to sell like a significant number of products, but without being on the radar of folks who, like you said, are very likely to copy you, and have Chinese sellers, see, oh, this is selling well. I have much better access to supply chain than these sellers do. I'm just going to undercut them on price and copy them. So this strategy, helped keep that from happening while also being able to sell a large number of units. And here's how it worked. So the way his brand operates is they have a large number of SKUs in fairly specific niches. And it's niches that are small enough to not get on the radar of Me Too, copycats. But it is significant enough volumes where that if somebody could win, in that product, they could sell, maybe 10, 15 units a day of that. And if you get, a portfolio of these, then you have a very significant business there. And the way that he would get on the top is to have a design advantage. So he had a design center in his business where they would make new products, not game-changing, brand new stuff, not like, Kickstarter worthy, but just better, like real design advantage, like their own design products that do solve problems that the other ones don't. So they're obviously better. So this is cool because if you did this with a very highly competitive category and you came out with a product that had a new feature, it's a 6-blade garlic cutter instead of a 2-blade garlic cutter. That if that was selling enough units, within a couple months, maybe sooner, you'd have the whole front page would be filled with 6-blade garlic cutters, garlic chops. Mm-hmm. So I really love this strategy. It was like the best of both worlds. Now, I don't follow that with my brand, but Chris is seeing great success with it. And I really like that. And I think that sellers that get creative about where they are able to add value without attracting, without playing on a playing field that they know they're going to lose. I think going back to what we were saying earlier, playing to the strengths is huge now, especially. And I think one of the biggest lessons to take out of this, that we've kind of touched on already, but it's just don't play on another. Don't look across, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? But don't look across and play on another field. Like if you are based in the US and you have, the culture so well because you were born and raised there and you're based there and you live there, then don't try to be, that type of opportunistic trend chasing seller that competes on price because you're never going to win. There are so many more folks out here who have better access to the supply chain better access to better price products, and better access and quicker access to cheaper people, human resources. So that's a game you're not going to win. Like if you're in that position, your strengths are, the people, the market. You should focus on what you're good at, and that is for you communication and authority building and brand building. So use those strengths, if you're in that position. Play on the playing field that gives you an advantage, not the other person, not what looks like a shiny object from afar. I think that's, from the last conversation I had with you, and through this webinar, that's one thing that I personally am taking out, is that, I'm not just going to chase any new tactic or new strategy that pops up, but make sure that I'm focusing on my strengths. Like you said, the Stephen Covey way.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. You're not going to beat them on price. You got to play to your strengths.
Yeah, exactly. Cool, man. Well, we're getting near the end here, and I actually forgot to reserve the last 10 minutes for Q&A. So now we only have 3 minutes for Q&A. Guys, if you have questions that are burning that you want answered, post them in the comments section right now, and we'll try to address those. A couple of these questions are rolling in now. We have the product. Okay, so everyone is asking, what are the product launch hacks Chinese sellers are using to dominate on Amazon? Now, I think we touched on actually a number of these, but the number one mindset or strategy that is not black hat, that is compliant. You say that number one mindset or strategy is for a product launch coming from, the Chinese seller community that we can take away. That's definitely not black hat.
Number one product launch strategy from the Chinese seller that is not black hat. I think, again, it's just playing to your strengths. Like these Yiwu sellers, they're going to have the advantage in launching jewelry products, because why? Their cousin has a factory that's doing jewelry, right? Like the Shenzhen sellers, they have the advantage in selling Apple Watch accessories because, their high school buddy owns the factory, and then they're the Amazon seller. I think, sourcing locally, that's their strength, and they can get a better price as well. So that's, to me, that's playing to their strengths. I mean, it's more of a mindset hack, but, for the US seller, I know that a lot of people, they don't think about like sourcing from the US, right? I mean, I know that, manufacturing, isn't what it used to be, but there's still opportunities out there in the US. And then if you can find like a local, maybe like a crafts manufacturer, whether it's some sort of, coffee product or some sort of customized product, I think that these are hacks that, you can copy from the Chinese seller, because, I mean, obviously there's more manufacturing in China, but there's still manufacturing in the US, in the UK. I know the people there also sourcing from Europe as well. And then that just, compared to the Chinese seller, you're leveraging the same advantages. I think that people are overlooking. But in your backyard, there's still opportunities to source products that Chinese sellers would never find.
That's definitely true, and I think that you're a very mindset focused and meta focused individual, Gary, and that's what I love about you. I think the community wants the number one strategy, and drilling down tactic level. So I think that we covered a ton of those in here, both black hat and white hat. But what we'll do is in the handout that we hand out at the end of this webinar that everybody will be sent, you can choose the one that you feel tactically, not just mindset, but actually tactically to highlight, so that everyone can have their one strategy that they feel that they can take from the Chinese seller community. Not that they can learn from not to do, but that they can actually take and implement into their businesses. So we'll add that in there, and you can highlight the one that you think is best, being that you are the expert here. So yeah, I think that this is actually a good time for you to tell us a little bit more about 80/20, Gary. I know you touched on it earlier, but I'd really like to hear personally, since we're at the end of this webinar period now, everyone, has gotten a ton of insights and value from your experience, being that you have both perspectives on either side of the coin. Can you tell us like how you guys are helping sellers now?
Just really quickly, 8020sourcing.com is our site that I help Amazon sellers scale their businesses, learn best practices, sourcing from China. So I offer video training courses and also coaching. I think I actually wanted to introduce a new thing that Chris and I we kind of talked about before. I'm actually I'm building a 7-figure seller summit, and it's going to be an online summit where we're inviting about 20 7-figure sellers in e-commerce and other experts to share some of their best strategies and to share some of their tactics and also their mistakes. So, a lot of the viewers today, I think in their businesses, they can, learn more about, what's working and being able to implement that. And if you kind of enjoyed what we've talked about today, I mean, I know we talked more about mindset and we did cover some strategies, but, we'll cover more in-depth interviews with these like $1 million sellers, because I feel like, it's that quote by Jim Rohn. I think, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? And then, obviously there's a lot of, Facebook groups, YouTube videos, etc. But like, how do you know who to trust? And then I feel like, just being able to surround yourself with these type of successful entrepreneurs, you can pick up a lot. And especially for me, because I feel like, being in China, even though, we have the advantage in sourcing, but at the same time, we don't have as much. I don't know about you, Chris, but for me, it's kind of hard to like maybe mastermind in person with like other, successful sellers to just to stay ahead, to be, at a higher level. So that's why that was the genesis behind this, because I wanted to bring these sellers to me, to bring these sellers to everybody else online.
It was selfish.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was selfish,
reason.
But I think at the same time, it helps. So I feel like it's good.
Definitely do.
So check out the site 7figuresellersummit.com, and to find out more info, you can get a free pass as well to watch the summit. And Chris is going to be on it as well. And I'm not going to reveal the topic yet, but if you guys sign up, we'll keep you posted.
So it's free.
Yeah, it's going to be a free summit for a limited time. So it's going to 24 hours, 4 speakers a day. And if they want, they can purchase the all access pass. They can get some bonuses from the speakers as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. I mean, honestly, really, really early on in my sales career, I joined a group. It was called Zon Squad. It was one of many masterminds, that are out there. But that was one of I might even say that was the biggest thing that accelerated our growth, was the ability to share knowledge. That the knowledge share is what advanced my business's growth so quickly. If I had to point to one single thing, it literally was that. And I would do it all over again. It was like a $350 a month subscription. And that was like a big pill to swallow at that time for me. But I just took it. And I remember, within 1 month, I was like, wow, like the knowledge I got from this just totally changed, just totally saved me, multiples more than I'm spending for this subscription, on whatever it was, like a new logistics provider that somebody recommended to me, or, a website that like vets sourcing agents for you, or whatever it is. It's like, if you don't have that constant knowledge share, you can't stay in the loop and on top of what's going on. So yeah, that's cool, man. So yeah, check that out, guys. As you heard, it's 100% free. Yeah, so we're at the end now. We still got people on board, even though we're 6 minutes over. So thanks everybody for sticking around. Really appreciate it. It was great having this talk with you, Gary. Can't wait to see you in person. I know that I missed the meetup on Saturday. I was fresh back from Hong Kong and like totally dead that day. I'd just gotten back like really late the night before. So I freaking missed that. So I'm bummed about that. But the next one, I'm committed to making it.
Yeah,
so,
next time. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Chris, for having me. I hope my insights were helpful for you guys. And I love what you're doing. I mean, I feel like you're adding a ton of value to your audience, and I hope everybody learned a lot today. And yeah, I just hope that you keep doing what you're doing, and I'm happy to support. All right.
Thanks, brother. Sounds great. And I want to throw one thing in there since we're at the end of this show anyway, and everybody has been free to leave for the last 7 minutes. We spent the whole time, delivering insights. But if you do want to accelerate the launch by paying someone else to do it for you instead of trying to do it manually yourself, for anybody who did sign up on this webinar, and we can like validate that the person had registered, Judo is giving one additional launch for every launch for one launch purchased. So it's 1-for-1 launch. It's something that we've never done before, but since we're talking about launch, I wanted to offer that to you guys in case any of you guys wanted to take the quick route. Otherwise, we'll keep the conversation going. Anybody who signed up for this will get the notes, the white paper outlining everything we talked about plus more, both mindset-wise, tactically, and strategy-wise. So you'll get it all straight to your inbox. And yeah, see you guys all next time. And Gary, I'll see you in person over drinks sometime soon.
Sounds great, Chris. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
All right. Peace out, man.